2000, and I was in exile of sorts myself since June of last year, when the English editor of Apple Daily was arrested at the airport. And what happened to all the columnists? Now, I'm not the day-to-day activist. I don't go to the streets a lot, but I just write the column. I have a radio show. And then 1 month before the enactment of the National Security Law in 2020, which is May 2020, I started a YouTube channel called Action World and also Action Life. One is in Cantonese, the other is in English. Just because I was thinking that there would be more duress and there would be more restriction of press freedom with the enactment of the NSL. And in less than 24 months, we witnessed the shutdown of Apple Daily. The founder, Jimmy Lai, is now in prison, waiting for trial, same as the senior management of Apple Daily. Plus, a lot of people who are trying to get a primary, just a primary in Hong Kong. They are detained for almost two years. District councillors, activists, and in 2019, with the democracy movement, more than 10,000 people were arrested in Hong Kong. And now, inside the prison system and the detainment system, we have close to 700 people who fight for freedoms are detained right now. Now, the Hong Kong prison itself has around 7,000 prisoners, so to speak. Now, I come from a hedge fund background. I'm a trader, but also back in the early 90s, I had a brief stay for 4 or 5 years running radio station in Toronto, a multicultural radio station called CHIN, which right now the airtime is procured to, I think, St. Daily. But anyways, this is just a little bit of background about why I think it is important for Hong Kongers and especially Tibetans, which I get involved when I had the opportunity to meet up with the Holiness the Dalai Lama in Australia, I think in 2015, and also in Brussels. And I met the pharmacist called Lobsang a few times, talk about what happened in Hong Kong and then the dismantling of Hong Kong over the last few years. So I guess the top priority for us as Hong Kongers now is how can we let the CCP and also like the Hong Kong government, which they just had an election, just a one-person election, just a few hours ago. The person elected is called John Lee, a hardliner with so-called police background. How can we let I would use the word like almost like POW, prisoners of war, to let Jimmy Lai, Joshua Wong, Professor Benny Tai get out from prison because they are unjustly detained for a long time. And I don't know whether the Hong Kong situation is as similar as Tibet, but it is some sort of a genocide as well. When they detained the people, when we see in 2019, there were a few people who were suddenly fell from a high building, and there was no evidence why they just fell, right? Things are quite strange, and also, I guess the point I want to make is Hong Kongers, they believe in the so-called one country, two systems model for a long time until probably in 2014 when we had the umbrella movement, and then 2019 when we had the fight for democracy movement. And then things did not okay because things got totally went out of whack. How do we connect with Tibetans, especially because I believe at the Parkdale area we have a large Tibetans and people from Hong Kong, they are in exile in all parts of the world. It's quite similar to what happened in 1959, 60 years later, the Hong Kong situation. There are some similarities, definitely. Also, there are some dissimilarities as well. I guess within the Hong Kong community, it's quite mixed. Some people are, when they live inside of Hong Kong, of course they are suppressed, and then you don't see a free media anymore. And then people are just kept to shut up. And then the exile door is still open. People can still leave. But after July 1st, I don't know whether this situation remains the same, whether the capital can leave easily. Now, things do happen in Ukraine and Russia. And with CCP's involvement with alleged being strategic alliance with Russia, with Hong Kong banks in general got sanctioned, would the SWIFT be not in use, so to speak? Because that's a decision not made by you and me, but within the forming members of the SWIFT system. So anyways, it is complicated to see the fate of the 7.5 million people living in Hong Kong. And there's one study that was done recently by boutique research firm in Ireland. They say 80% of Hong Kongers, they want to leave Hong Kong. 80%, 80. That's a huge figure. So I guess, do we have some sort of a genocide, just like what happened in Tibet in 1959? That I heard a lot of stories that 1.2 million people got killed during that period of time, and then we lost the culture, the language. Yes, I think we as Hong Kongers probably we will lose our Cantonese and also the traditional Chinese. We don't fight back. And we condemn the CCP for misleading us in believing that the one country, two systems is still intact. In less than 6 weeks, we will be in the second phase of the so-called one country, two systems, which really doesn't exist. So how do we fight back? Is it forming a government in exile? I don't know at this point in time, but I think it is very important to at least raise the concern, and then we have to make ourselves very loud and let the whole world know that Hong Kongers, we stand with Tibetans, with the people in Ukraine, and we do fight for justice. And it's important then let other people think that Hong Kong is still like a great international city, which is not. Hong Kong has lost its glory since 2020, July 1st. But we have to, as Hong Kongers who are in all parts of the world, we have to keep the Hong Kong spirit alive, and also we have to fight for justice, and we have to unite with people who fight for freedom and justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Next, I have Winnie, the president of the Toronto Association for Democracy in China.
The essence of what President had said earlier about the link, the need for a coordinated and organized, but more importantly also the solidarity among all of us across the globe. And the other piece that we've been doing is also working in solidarity with Uyghurs and Tibetan groups, and in different rallies, such as the boycott for the Olympic Games, boycott of the Winter Games, and so on and so forth. It's to make sure that, solidarity building, relationship building doesn't happen just because of one march. It needs time, it needs years of building, and that trust needs to be built among all of us. when we share the common enemy of the current Chinese totalitarian government. And then since 2019, our group has also, after witnessing that the version 2 of Tiananmen Square massacre has actually taken place in Hong Kong, we have started the support work, the resettlement work of some of the former Hong Kong protesters into Canada, supporting them in applying for refugee claimant status and all that. So those are some, and then the other piece that we've been doing is the lobbying, and which is why I want to get into the next piece. It's TADC, it's a political organization, but we are a non-partisan organization. And that when you see what has happened at the Canadian political landscape, things have, after, there's no doubt that after the arrest of Meng Wanzhou and then the retaliations of the arrest of the two Michaels and so on and so forth, the relationship between Canada and China has been on the decline. It's damaged, but at the same time, I think we also need to be cognizant that Canada and China's trade, there's a $57 billion trade deficit. That means Canada import a whole lot more from China than we export. And so it's in that regard, I believe the current Liberal government is now trying to extend and rebuild, quote, the relationship with the Chinese government, despite our protests. So in that sense, I think we need to be a whole lot more vigilant. How do we make sure we put human rights first before trade? When Canada and China's trade is only around 4% of the total trade agreements. And I think we also need to be cognizant that, just to share the information, that in Canada, 3 out of 5 Canadians actually want less trade with China. And that's from the Angus Reid poll and research back in January this year. So we are saying, how do we tap on this and seize that as an opportunity to turn things around? How do we work together to be vigilant on our government, on our MPs? And then if we take a look at the upcoming provincial Ontario elections on June 2nd, if you take a look at some of the candidates, most of the candidates from the Liberal and the Conservative MPP candidates, most of them are linked with pro-Beijing, pro-business background. And so how do we make sure that we are going to be, we as Canadians here, elect people that will speak on human rights, that will speak on justice and peace, as the President has said, and how do we make sure that our path for going forward, it's going to be, when we are saying, solidarity is about coming together in one hand so we can have a fist to punch. How do we make sure that comes together? And this is what we continue having a conversation. So thank you very much for the time.